Recently, I decided to check out the Panic garage sale. If you're a longtime Mac nerd, you've probably heard of Panic as they've made apps like Audion and Transmit, published games like Firewatch and Untitled Goose Game, and created the Playdate. And they happened to be here in Portland, Oregon. It was busy and they had a line, but I managed to pick up a Mighty Mouse for $1 and a USB one at that. The Mighty Mouse gets the dubious honor of being the first multi-button mouse that Apple ever made in its history, and it was not released until 2005. Instead of a scroll wheel, it featured a mini trackball for scrolling with left and right zones for left and right click, and side buttons for a squeeze function. It's unconventional, but it seems like they might be onto something. This is hardly my first encounter with one of these mice, as my Mac Pro 2008 came with one of these, except for it was the wireless version, which was released in 2006, operated on AA batteries, and used Bluetooth. That said, I sold it without ever using it, as I had a Logitech MX1000 back then, so it's time to correct that. So, for the duration of editing this video, I'm going to use this mouse instead of my Logitech G703. One of the great ironies of Apple is, despite being closely associated with popularizing the mouse, it's generally not a question of which is their best mouse, but rather which is the worst. And I'll be damned if they don't have some bad ones. Be it the infamous Puck Mouse, the single-button optical mouse, or the specially divisive Magic Mouse. A mouse that I can't defend, but I don't hate it until I have to charge it. It's also worth pointing out that optical mice have improved vastly over the years, through advances in the CMOS sensors for greater resolution, less latency, switching from LED to laser, and so forth. Being nearly a 20-year-old LED optical mouse means that the Mighty Mouse is just not going to be the highest precision mouse. Impressively, macOS still supports this mouse, even in Sonoma. I wasn't 100% sure it would, as it's a 19-year-old mouse, but it's still configurable. This is necessary, as macOS defaults this to a one-button mouse mode, so to enable the right click, you need to go to the mouse configuration and set it to secondary click.
Now here's something I didn't expect: native Mighty Mouse support. So here I am, scrolling up and down, that works, and I can even scroll left to right on the URL bar. The little ball is working. And then, of course, if we go back, right-click is working too, just out of the box in Windows 11. Would have never guessed this. All right, so the support W's keep coming. This is Mint Linux running on my black MacBook, and I can scroll in all the different directions. That is really surprising. Oh, and I should add right-click works too. That's not surprising.
These mice notoriously can get pretty gross if they're heavily used. Due to the relatively good condition, I imagine this mouse spent the majority of its life in the desk drawer at Panic and not being used to create apps like Transmit. I assume this would be the case because of the blue pen mark as evidence of it living in a drawer among miscellaneous items. However, I think I can get this looking close to new. The Mighty Mouse is somewhat serviceable, except for the outer ring requires regluing, so let's walk through the process. First, pop out the outer ring, which is pretty easy, followed by the inner ring, which I ended up just brute forcing. After that, it takes popping out the innards, which takes some force, but be aware there are two wires connected to the button and the wheel, so don't overdo it. The scroll wheel earned a lot of criticism for being hard to clean. Fortunately, mine is clean and in working order, so I'm not going to completely disassemble this mouse. While this mouse is pretty clean, there is some grit and grime, so I used isopropyl alcohol with paper towels to clean it off. Also, it only took a little bit of elbow grease and isopropyl alcohol to remove the blue mark off the mouse. Putting it back together isn't terribly hard, although it's a bit tedious. Aligning the holes for the inner ring is really a pain. Then you need to re-glue the outer ring. I used Gorilla Glue, but probably any super glue will do, hitting multiple points, and I squeezed it together while it's set, which took roughly a minute. Now the Mighty Mouse is looking nearly new. From this point on is the review portion. What can I say about this mouse? It's a dud. But to call it terrible seems a bit egregious. The ergonomics of this mouse are definitely form over function, but I have to give it some props because it is a ambidextrous design. The click is somewhat resistant and a bit spongy, making it not the most satisfying to use. However, it's much more useful than its predecessor, as Apple finally gave in and gave it the ability to use a second mouse button, even if it's a bit goofy. What do I mean? Well, if you try and click the left and then the right mouse button, you have to fully depress the mouse before clicking the other side of the mouse. Otherwise, it won't register this as a different click. Leave it to Apple to finally give in and make a multi-button mouse, only to half-ass it. For some games and certain creative apps, this can be a major issue. The most ingenious part of the design is the trackball scroll wheel, which should be amazing, but I found it surprisingly bad. It was either not sensitive enough or far too sensitive. This is coming from someone who actually loves the 4-direction scrolling of the Magic Mouse. Simply put, the Mighty Mouse scrolling lacks precision. I even tried this mouse under OS X Snow Leopard on a black MacBook 2007 just to make sure it wasn't modern Mac OS. It still was really bad. Seriously, the idea of a trackball as the scroll wheel seems like a great idea, but it's just so janky. I wanted to love it, but I don't. In fact, I kinda hate it. I would much prefer having a horizontal only scroll wheel. The trackball also has a click function that's not very satisfying to use in the least bit, and we're not even to the worst feature yet. That dubious honor goes to the side buttons, which use a squeeze function to trigger. This might not sound horrible on paper, but it's amazing how terrible it feels. When you squeeze the side buttons, there isn't a click, thus there's not really a feedback mechanism, and the 2 side buttons only function as a single button, meaning you can't use this for back and forth buttons when web browsing like you can with the classic IntelliMouse from 2000. I do need to correct myself. Technically, the side buttons do have a click sound, but this comes from a tiny internal speaker. If you unplug it, it won't make a sound. It's so poorly executed that it effectively makes the squeeze buttons non-functional. I'm guessing very few users actually made use of the squeeze functionality. The Mighty Mouse feels like a product from, say, 1999 or 2000, back when mice were still evolving. By 2005, when the Mighty Mouse was released, mice were basically a solved puzzle. Let me give some examples. At the high end, Logitech released their first laser mouse in 2004 with the MX1000, which was also wireless and had a rechargeable battery. In 2005, Logitech released the first version of the MX518, a mouse so loved that Logitech has been shipping versions of it for nearly 2 decades. Around that same time, Razer released this Death Adder series, which is still shipping today too. Again, the point being that mice from about 2004 to 2006 are essentially the mice we have today, with just less good electronics inside. One would think Apple landed on a classic design during this period, yet no one is asking Apple to re-release another Mighty Mouse. As far as aesthetics go, this is one of Apple's weaker designs. The original clear optical mouse, even if not terribly good, at least looked good, and the much hated Puck mouse is certainly seeped in nostalgia and style. The Magic Mouse also has a much more striking design, at least in my opinion. I wouldn't call the Mighty Mouse ugly, but the design feels like it was appeasing Johnny Ive's OCD rather than a device that was made for comfort or ease of use. Apple could have achieved an ambidextrous design with a trackball and made it a lot more ergonomic. I personally do not like the way this feels. This might sound like kind of a soft complaint, but the sponginess of this mouse is just not pleasant to click. If you compare this to just about any other mouse, there's a springy, nice snap to clicks. It doesn't matter what mouse I'm using. Basically, every other mouse I have in my possession feels better than this mouse. Even junky mice like this no-name Lenovo one that I bought on eBay for $1 feels a little bit more springy and spry. Even the Magic Mouse, with its notoriously weird feel, has a definite hard click. This, I have to push down and there's a resistance to the click. I just hate it. There's a very strange dichotomy between Apple's mice and trackpads. For years, Apple's made the best-in-class trackpads, but for the past 25 years, its mice charitably could be best described as usable. Even then, I found myself struggling when using this mouse. I expected it to be pleasant because of the trackball based on my previous experience with the Magic Mouse. I actually prefer editing videos with a Magic Mouse over my Logitech due to the gestures and horizontal scrolling, despite being an otherwise inferior mouse to my G703. Because of this, I had high hopes for the Mighty Mouse's scroll ball. No matter when or how I'm trying to scroll, it's either too fast or too slow. Watch as I try and scrub through this video on the Mighty Mouse. I feel like making this meta right now. Here, check this out. I'm editing the video that you're watching right now, and I'm trying to scroll very smoothly with the Mighty Mouse. It's not a smooth scroll like you would expect. Instead, it jumps in intervals. Quite frankly, it doesn't feel great. Now, here I am doing the exact same thing using the Magic Mouse, and it's buttery smooth. In fact, I can get nearly pixel-perfect accurate scrolling. This mouse is fairly controversial because it's not very comfortable to use for a lot of users, but they just really nailed scrolling. It's buttery smooth in any direction. It's as natural as using a touchpad on a laptop, whereas this guy, this little thing right here, not so good. It seems like a great idea, like I've said before, but it jumps. It's kind of janky. I don't know what else to say other than it's not well executed. Okay, I know I'm spending too much time on this, but watch this. Circles, and then on the screen, circles. That's my cat Jeff, by the way. Now let's try this with the Mighty Mouse. We're going to try it again, and oh, wow. Okay, I'm trying to do circles. It's just jumping all kinds of different ways. That's what I mean by this having a much better scroll. Another thing I'm not crazy about, but I understand, is the criminally short mouse cable. It's meant to be plugged into the side of one of Apple's keyboards. Here is a good representation of how short this cable is. This 13-inch MacBook only has ports on the left-hand side. Yeah, so I think my point is obvious. This mouse isn't usable if you need to run it to the other side of your laptop. So yes, I'm not a fan of this mouse, and I came in with low expectations, but I still managed to be sufficiently disappointed. Mostly because of the trackball and poor ergonomics. I didn't hate the Puck mouse, and I kind of liked the Magic Mouse, so clearly I'm not a mouse diva. I wondered how others felt about the Mighty Mouse in retrospect, so I went looking for opinions, and there's not really much nostalgia for this product. I found a few small Reddit threads where some people actually preferred the Mighty Mouse over the Magic Mouse, but that's about it. I'm positive it had its fans, but I imagine most people who used it only did so because it shipped with their computer, and anyone who cared about quality mice likely bought more traditional mice that offered objectively better functionality and performance. It's impossible for me to completely disassociate my opinion from today's technology landscape versus what it would have been in 2005, so I looked up some retro reviews. The Mighty Mouse didn't even seem to generate much fanfare from the press. Reviews from 2005 like Anantech, Ars Technica, and CNET all seem to agree that there's problems with this mouse and downright disliked the side buttons. They even called them horrible. The reviews at best are described as lukewarm. By 2009, opinions had turned fully negative, with TechCrunch publishing an article titled, "Apple, your Mighty Mouse sucks, please fix it," listing a laundry list of complaints such as bad ergonomics, nearly non-functional side buttons, bad battery life on the wireless version, using white plastic that became dirty over time, and the difficulty of cleaning the trackball. I was worried I was being unfair, but my impressions align with popular opinion. The Mighty Mouse feels really undercooked. It really should have been much better, as it has strong improvements over its predecessor like left and right click, thumb buttons, and a clever scroll wheel, but it's all poorly executed in a mushy ovaloid shape. Almost any aftermarket optical mouse from about 2005 to 2009 would have provided much better ergonomics and likely a much more pleasant experience. I don't like to make purely negative content, but it's really difficult to find nice things to say about it. Is this Apple's worst mouse? Absolutely not. That goes to the Puck mouse based on consensus, even if I personally don't hate it. It's also not the worst optical mouse I've ever used, as I've used some pretty abysmally bad mice. However, I'd argue this is Apple's second worst mouse, as it managed to fail in so many ways and how much worse it was compared to the best mice of its day. I'm not a huge fan of its predecessor, the Apple Pro mouse, but I'm willing to give it a bit more wiggle room, as in 2000, shipping old computers with optical mice still wasn't standard. One button or not, it was still a lot closer to its competition. And as I said before, it kinda looks cool even if the ergonomics aren't great. At the price of $1, I feel like I got a pretty good deal on it, as I can easily reach for it when dealing with retro Macs if I'm in the mood for a retro mousing experience. This particular unit I picked up was in really good condition. Taste is subjective, so I imagine some people really like the appearance, and perhaps this mouse occupies a special place in their memory, as it's the mouse that came with their first computer, or their first Mac, or they used it as a child. Yeah, don't worry, that makes me feel old too. This mouse came out when I was in my 20s. If you liked or loved this mouse, I'm not here to tell you you're wrong. It's certainly a unique product, and for users who love a period-correct retro Mac, it's a must. However, for everyone else, it's best to grab a modern laser mouse and just relive our retro Mac experiences in luxurious high DPI, low latency glory. After all, speaking as someone who lived through this era, it's period correct to ignore Apple's mice offerings and use something better. As always, I'd like to thank my Patreons for keeping this mid-roll ad-free, and also be on the lookout because I'm going to make a sequel to this video with every single USB and wireless Apple mouse. And on screen should be a video the YouTube algorithm thinks you would like. Check it out.